And good afternoon here at JAX London. So this talk is about effective leadership in Agile DevOps environments. I'm not going to get into Agile or DevOps during this talk, but what triggered this talk for me to develop this is we live in a society, or we as developers, as testers, as everybody in IT, in software development, the way we are doing things today in modern software development, we're talking about lean, we're talking about agile, we're talking about DevOps. These concepts have a central tendency to place responsibility for developing software with a team, and to give that team a certain degree of autonomy. Depending on who you talk to, that may be absolute autonomy or no autonomy at all. But those questions have impact on leadership. Self-organization has impact on leadership because, well, one could say, if you have a fully autonomous team that is completely self-organized, why would one appoint a leader? Why would one want a leader? So my premise, my central question today is there still a role for leaders in modern software development? And I'll start a little bit with introducing myself and why I may have something to say about this, which is left to the readers check later on. But this is me as a developer, as a trainer, as a speaker, as a coach. I'm from the Netherlands. I work at a lot of Dutch companies, see a lot of companies as a freelancer, talk with people. I've led teams both as a lead developer, but also as a chapter lead, so a technology lead, a lead backend, for example. And I've done a few gigs as a scrum master. But there's one more part to me, and that also influences my views on leadership. And that is, for the past 8 years, I've been a non-commissioned officer with the Dutch Army, the Dutch Army Reserves, which is comparable to the UK Territorial Army, which is now rebranded, of course. I've been in positions as a squad leader, leading a group of 10 men or 10 men and women. And now I'm operating as a platoon leader, commanding 35. This, of course, has some bearing on my views on leadership. What I'm about to tell you today is definitely not the end-all, be-all. Liz gave a very interesting keynote this morning, and this builds on it, and this is my view on effective leadership in the current context. Before we begin, though, please raise your hand if you are currently in a leadership position. Cool. That's almost half of the audience. Who of you that are not currently in a leadership position have ambitions to go there at some point? Okay. And who of you want to understand their leader better? Awesome. Awesome. So that's all the audience. Excellent. Let's first start with setting up a little bit of context before we begin properly. The context a leader, whoever he or she is, finds themselves in. Let's start with the individual. The individual, I noticed this morning that most of us here are developers, but there's a bunch of other people as well. The individual could be, well, in my context, could also be a soldier. And there's one interesting thing about an individual. And that is that most of the things we see, or that an individual is, we actually cannot see. Take the iceberg, for example. You see only the tip of the iceberg and the rest is below the waterline. And this is exactly the same for us human beings. There's only a little bit we can see and all the rest is below the waterline. What can we see is behavior, knowledge, skills, what people can do. This is visible to us. This is their, we can see what they do and we can see the things that they do. But what we cannot see is people form opinions about things and they have values and they have a certain image, self-image. And this is very much below the waterline. So what people think, we cannot see inside people's heads. And then there's even deeper inside a person. There's what drives you? What drives me as a person? What are my most inner motivations? What are my qualities? What am I really interested in? So what I want as a person. These are all the things that you are dealing with as a leader, looking at an individual. Now, this individual may find themselves in a team of developers, a two-pizza team, or, again, in my case, a group of soldiers trying to go towards a common task. And what's interesting about that team is, there we go, it has a certain maturity. The team may be composed of only senior developers or only junior and one or two seniors. So they have a certain maturity. They were also assigned a certain responsibility or claim a certain responsibility. There's a certain level of trust, not only within the team, from individual to individual, but also from the company or the organization at large towards the team. And they have a certain degree of autonomy, depending on the organization that they're in. Now, this team finds themselves in a company. And a company, this is one of our army bases in the Netherlands, a company has core values and a culture. Well, it should definitely have core values, but it will have a culture. And that culture may be good or bad, depending on your context, but it is something to be aware of as a leader within the company. And a company definitely has a mission, even if they're not stating it. And it should be as clear-cut as possible, that mission. Now, moving on to what the leader is actually all about, at least in my view. We have different types of leaders, of course, and leadership on many different levels. When I talk to people and I say I'm at least part-time military and I train people and I coach people, this is the meme that people refer to. You've probably all seen some variant of this. And yes, this does exist. And in a certain context, it absolutely has value. But this is not typically what I do. But even though we see this meme, let's take a look at a few leadership theories that are out there disregarding this one. The first one and the most simple one is directive leadership. I say, you do. Done. It's about setting clear expectations, potentially enforcing them, clearly setting the task that you expect somebody or a group of somebodies to do. This is a leadership style you can apply when there's time pressure or other types of pressure. What I find typically I refer to the most is participative leadership. And participative leadership, and you can look at this on many different levels, means we involve our teams or our people as much as possible, depending again on constraints such as time. But participative leadership could, for example, mean that I, as a team leader, completely trust the people in my team to come up with a decision that is within certain constraints that I gave out. So this is the amount of money you have. Build something nice. That's a very, very simple constraint. Or do not go left of this, do not go right of this. As long as you stay within those lines, any solution that you can come up with is nice. And there's various different types of participative leadership you can use. You can defer or delegate completely to the team, or as a leader, you can be involved in those decisions. And then there is the concept of the servant leader. The servant leader, as the name says, is on earth to serve a team, and to serve a team with solid leadership. Qualities you can think of as a servant leader are servant leaders should be able to listen. They should have a large degree of empathy. They should be able to persuade rather than command. They should be able to heal and connect and make communities of people. And all that to get the best out of people and get them working effectively together. Taking all these together, we come towards situational leadership. And situational leadership as a model is definitely not new. And it looks like this. The situational leadership model basically means that depending on both the situation and the person we are dealing with, and the time we are dealing in, we apply a different type of leadership. So if we are looking at a person on the S1 part of the picture, that person is very new to a particular task. We would have high directive, behavior. We would be very close to that person and directing them to do certain things. And then we move on to coaching, where we actually start doing more of a high supportive behavior and letting the person do more on their own. This proceeds into the S3, where we only start supporting. We know that the person is very capable of the task, and now we're just supporting them with the tools that they need to actually finish that or do that. And all the way on the left is the S4, the delegation. We actually know that the person there is very capable of doing the thing, even in different conditions, and we can completely trust them to finish it. So we only make sure that the tools and the things that they need are in place. This model is very useful when you're dealing with a group of people in a team that are not of the same level of expertise, for example. And what this can also be useful in is not everybody responds equally to the same type of leadership. In my career, both in IT and in the military, I've seen people that respond better to directive, and I've seen people that respond better to participative leadership, and everything in between. And it can also vary based on the day of the week. And this is one of the most interesting but difficult parts of being a leader, being able to switch between those styles depending on what the person and the situation needs. So my take on effective leadership. And I'm going to copy Stanley McChrystal, General Stanley McChrystal, now retired. He says, effective leaders stir an intangible but very real desire inside people. So this is all about intrinsic motivation and letting that come to the fore as much as possible. Right? So an effective leader, to me, and you can quote me on this, enables a team to reach its full potential, whatever that full potential is. But the effective leader is all about setting the stage so that people can perform, can do their task as best as possible. They remove obstacles. You know, a scrum master, of course, has to remove impediments. It's one of the ceremony things. But even if we remove the word scrum master and remove impediments, a leader still has to do that. Remove obstacles for a team, for an individual that hinder them to be at their best, to perform at their best. And also, one oft overlooked but key part is developing people by providing them with training, with education, with budget to experiment, to go to conferences, for example. And also give them feedback, like we talked about this morning, or like Liz talked about this morning, about the ways of giving effective feedback. That helps people grow and develop. But also very important is developing leaders, because as David Marquette stated in his book, Turn the Ship Around, and this is a very interesting book that I absolutely recommend you read. This is all about the leader-leader situation, rather than leader-follower, which is the old version or the traditional way of doing things. So at the core is the belief that we can all be leaders, and as a matter of fact should, and in fact it is best when we all are. So rather than having a personality leadership type, when they leave, that everything falls into shambles. This is what he describes in the book. He endeavors to go toward the leader-leader situation, where everybody is able to be at their best and be a leader in their own field and in their own unique way. So develop leaders. It also means that you need to develop yourself as a leader, if you are one, or intending to be. Talk with other leaders. Set up some kind of intervision or peer-to-peer feedback system, so that you can grow as a leader. Provide space. Liz talked about safety this morning. This is pretty much the same thing. Give people space to grow, to experiment, to fail, to learn in a safe environment. And so that your team as a whole can improve and learn about new things and make mistakes and grow. When it comes to effective leadership, I consider a few important traits that I think that every leader should have, or at least endeavor to have. And the first of that is, quoting Sun Tzu, we lead by example and not by force. What do I mean with this? People copy. People copy behavior. If they see bad behavior, they will copy that bad behavior, and it will set a precedent. So as a leader, consider yourself always to be more in the spotlight than everybody else, because you are. It's very simple. If I, as a leader, whether that's in the IT or the military context, that does not matter. If I do something that I don't want my people to do, then by doing that something, I've lost all credibility on that particular subject. So this is akin to a transportation minister getting a speeding ticket, right? That reduces all credibility when he talks about safety in traffic and talks about speeding cameras and stuff like that. So a leader leads by example, setting an example. A leader should have integrity, and I cannot emphasize this enough. You cannot have a little bit of integrity. You are or you're not. And your integrity is shown in your actions. You can say that you have integrity, but people will only know it by your actions. Empathy, knowing how to communicate to people, knowing how to listen, knowing where they are coming from, what their situation is, and understanding why they may be doing the things that they're doing, which is not as easy as it sounds. But empathy is a unique or an important trait that I think every leader should have, and that you can develop. Another one is being visible. I was in a project 2 years ago where there was a leadership personality, and they said, "My door is always open." I'm sure somebody's heard that one before. My door is always open. Which was a terrible cliche, because yes, he was visible, but he was not present in the metaphorical sense of the word. He projected an aura of don't bother me. The way he acted busy, essentially. And that, even though people saw that his door was really physically open, he projected an aura that he was inaccessible. So be present, not only physically, but also mentally. Bless you. Be approachable. Project an aura that you want to know things. I'm not sure who said this, but there was a famous quote, "Don't give me problems, give me solutions." And there's one big drawback in that, is that people are not going to tell you about things that are going on. So always be approachable to everything that is going on. Always be approachable to your people. Be responsible. This sort of goes hand in hand with having integrity. Be responsible about the way you are dealing with things. Be responsible about bad news, for example. Another project I was on, and this one definitely stuck with me, because I thought this was a unique example of not being responsible. There was a person, a leader that in this project, about half of the workforce had to be let go. This was all freelancers, so contractually there was not a problem. And the reasoning behind it was good, because there was simply not enough work for the workforce that was there. However, the way that it was communicated by the leadership was not. The person actually making the decision, senior leadership, delegated telling the decision to a junior product owner. And while this was going on, the junior PO was a very good guy, but he was not in any shape and form prepared for this. While this was going on, the senior person was off to the side in a room with glass walls, very visible, very present, but on his phone, talking to somebody else. While not 5 yards from him, people were getting very bad news. So even in those situations, as a leader, step up. Don't give that nasty task of being the bearer of bad news to somebody else. If you've made the decision, then be responsible, be an adult about it, and tell people yourself. Adaptability. Nothing moves as fast as software development. And so what we do today may not be the things we do tomorrow. And what we see when we deploy software in the wild may catch us off guard. And the leader should be adaptable and should be able to change gears and change directions when necessary, and not stick to a plan that obviously cannot be executed anymore. Communicative. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about what is going on. Information is motivation. And being decisive. Making decisions rather than not making decisions at all. And be vulnerable. This is a key thing. We are humans. Everybody has their limitations, including the leaders. Be open about them. Be clear about when you screwed up and how you would like to figure that out or be better later on. Know your limitations as a leader. And last but not least, don't forget to get out of the way. It's easy to be a personality leadership type, but it's far more effective to get out of the way. So leaders in modern delivery teams. We are faced with many challenges these days. Stanley McChrystal, in his book, Team of Teams, this is another recommendation, he talks about how the world has gone from complicated to complex, and how we as mere human beings cannot predict anymore what is the outcome of a certain thing. He talks about dealing with terrorism in the networked age in Iraq, which, because of all the technology, they were able to move much faster than a traditional organization. And he talks about how he dealt with that by basically making sure that there were flat lines of communication and other things. But organizations all across the world are facing challenges. A complex world where it used to be a complicated world. A fast-moving world. Self-organization in this world. Small steps. Of course, we do that. We talk about maturity of teams. And we talk about leadership on multiple levels. Liz talked about personal leadership. Well, of course, leadership in multiple ways. The first one is technical leadership. We're all here or most of us are here as developers. And we can be a leader on a technical level. Whether that's influencing the way our architecture goes, or choosing a particular type of framework or a system that we want to integrate. Technical leadership is a very important thing. Somebody's willing to stick for something else and trying to persuade people to go with that. Personal leadership, making sure that you yourself grow, that you are healthy, fit, that you can take on life's challenges, that you have inner discipline that you invoke or train. And transformational leadership, going or guiding your team or your organization through very difficult changes, going from waterfall to agile. This is not easy. This takes leaders on all levels having a vision and communicating clearly about that. I think effective leadership is ultimately about getting things done. At my inner core, I'm a pragmatist, so I try to always get there, get to the finish and deliver something. And I think this is ultimately what is useful in a leader, getting things done, getting things out the door, taking charge, especially when things are not moving or our competitor is moving faster than us. I think, to sum it all up, that leaders add value, even if we talk about autonomy and self-organization. I think, and I'm not the only one, leaders can help teams become greater than the sum of their parts. In Accelerate, just a few months old, the real value of a leader or manager is manifest in how they amplify the work of the team. So the leader is nothing without the team, but together they go to great lengths. One thing I would want to give you before we stop is never stop improving yourself. Not only you as a person, but also your leadership skills, or your leadership, your wishes and the things you want to do. Always experiment. with leadership styles, for example. If you've never experimented with directive leadership, because maybe that's not you as a natural person, you're not used to naturally directing people, then maybe experiment with that for a while. Or vice versa. I myself, for example, I'm pretty directive in nature. So participative leadership, especially on the far end of the scale, requires some work from me. And that's very good because that means I learn and hopefully grow. Find your own style of leadership. This is a very important part. And definitely tweak it. Be open to feedback. Be open to everything you hear around you. Be open to all the information that you see, and hopefully that will help you improve as well. Ask for feedback as much as possible and as often as possible. And learn. Because, as Anthony J. said, the only real training for leadership is leadership. I thank you.